I don't know any other product on the planet where you're paying for something and you don't know what you're paying for.
Welcome to Self-Funded with Spencer, sponsored by Pareto Health, ClaimDoc, and PlanSite. Whether we're discussing innovative new healthcare strategies, exposing hidden revenue streams or misaligned incentives, or even just cheering on the next generation of this industry, we promise you that you're going to learn something. So thank you for joining us for another great conversation about the future of healthcare.
Give a shout out to Chris Fisher. Have you seen his 3x3x3 format? Are you familiar with
Yes,
this? Okay.
I am.
And I did one the other day. I'm still waiting on approval. Kind of did the one for Pareto.
Yeah.
But man, like I discovered that's difficult to take a talk track that might take us 30 to 45 minutes,
Right.
depending on the setting, and turn it into something that's 3 slides, 3 questions, 3 minutes. But I also liked it. There was like an excitement. It's like, how simple can I make this and just wham bam and we're out. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And that was the
but it's like a
fear.
great test as a salesperson because we get really long-winded. We think we need to dump everything on people, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately it's like the elevator pitch a little bit. And if you can't do it in 3 minutes, then you can't do it in 30 minutes. So you're going to have people go, okay, that's interesting or not, but
Yeah.
you leave a lot of things out because you have to pick just the most important details to cover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a challenge. And I said, okay, challenge accepted. I'm going to do this just because I want to.
Well, clearly it went well.
It did.
Yeah. Well, so Stephanie, why don't we'll go ahead and get kicked off, and I'll
Sure.
introduce you. So I'm here with Stephanie Koch.
Yes.
You're the Director of Human Resources, Hendry Marine Industries.
Correct.
Got it all. It's
Good
always so
job.
funny. That's like the thing that I'm most worried about, whether or not I get like the original stuff, because it's the only thing I have to remember is just the very first,
basic
the
stuff.
basic stuff. Yeah. Well, Stephanie, welcome, and thanks so much for traveling down.
Thank you for having me.
So today we're going to cover the employer's voice. And I was telling you over coffee how excited, because I rarely get to feature the perspective of an employer. I have brokers and vendors and everybody around the employer talking about how great self-funding is and all that stuff. We're going to hear directly from somebody who's done it. And,
Yes.
And so kind of summarize, if you will, for 30 seconds or so, what we're going to cover today, and then we're going to go into your backstory and learn about you personally.
Okay. So I thought it was important to reach out to you to talk about, my experience as an employer moving from a fully funded healthcare plan because I've been in HR over 25 years. So I have experience in all areas of HR, but particularly healthcare, and working in that space fully funded, and then moving to self-funded with one of the BUCAs, and then moving to what I call non-traditional healthcare space over the past 7 years. And the achievements and things that we have been able to accomplish, in that space it is so important that I feel the need to talk about it and really get that information out there so other HR professionals and companies understand their responsibility.
Well, what I love about that, and especially your experience, is you get to we're going to cover the whole progression, right? You've kind of seen the entire spectrum of self-funding, and I can't wait to dig into what your current plan is, because it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about it, because it's really, really innovative. But also you're going to be able to give perspective at different steps along the way, and something at Pareto, but something I've just seen over the last decade of doing this, is there is a spectrum. And sometimes people, when they get introduced to self-funding at first, they go, oh my God, it's so overwhelming and it's too much and there's too many choices. You can kind of stair-step your way into this and iterate over time. You don't have to go 100 miles an hour day one, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Well, so let's go backwards. Stephanie,
Okay.
first, right? You're in Florida today with Hendry Marine, but let's go back to kind of a little bit of your bio.
Sure.
Where'd you grow up, kind of who you are, if you want to share a story or two, and then we'll get into kind of your work career and your educational career too, if you want to talk about that. Yeah.
So I actually grew up in New Jersey.
Okay.
And I left there when I was 30 years old to relocate to Florida. And back then I did work in HR, and I always had a desire to help people and bring people together for, the greater good. That was always something like a mission of mine. And regardless of working in HR, I always felt it was important, to support the employer, but also to make sure the employees were taken care of.
Have you always been drawn to human resources? Did you know this is what you wanted to do when you were in school and things like that, or?
So that's a funny question.
Okay.
So when I was younger, I did very well in high school, and I got a scholarship to go to secretarial school.
Okay.
I graduated high school back in 1988, and back then it was something that was very a prestigious job to get a job as an executive assistant. So I went to secretarial school, and I could do a mean steno, doing shorthand.
Okay. I don't even know
Probably
what a
can't
mean
do it
steno.
anymore.
I'm sorry, I don't know what a mean steno is.
It's like hieroglyphics for handwriting.
Oh, okay. Is that stenography?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I got you. Okay.
But when I finished and I got my first full-time job, I remember sitting there thinking, this is not what I want to do the rest of my life. And I made a decision to go back to college. And I went to school for 9 years at night to get my bachelor's degree.
No kidding. 9 years. Okay. And what was
I was working full-time.
Yeah.
So I could only take 1 or 2 classes at a time.
Yeah.
So it took that
Well,
long.
I didn't even mean that as any sort of insult.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm thinking, wow, the commitment for a 9-year period, right, to can just progressively work towards that degree and then stay that track. I mean, a lot of people might go, I don't know if I'm ever going to get done, right? But you stuck it out. And so what did you study when you went back?
So it was business management, but by then I had started working in human resources, and I started connecting the dots. So I knew how important that was to an organization's success or failure.
What kind of organization were you working at the time?
I was working as an HR rep for a food broker.
Okay.
So they kind of served as the intermediary between supermarket and manufacturer, kind of like a supplemental sales force, if you will.
And so early days of HR and human resources, and then we'll talk about how you got into to benefits and got introduced to benefits. But what was sort of your job description, or what were some of the things that you were doing at that time?
So it was really about communication to the employees. I did onboarding, and I explained the company benefits, helped employees, with policy administration, questions about paid time off and simple things, and did a little bit of traveling.
Okay.
And that was fun because I'd never traveled before.
Yeah.
I was in my 20s, and I remember having to help facilitate, onboarding for companies. We were going through some acquisitions, and it was really exciting.
Yeah, well, I love that. And I suspect you have, and I think you even said this earlier, you have a real passion for people, right? For human beings. I mean, I think you're drawn initially even to human resources because you like working with people. But is there an overarching sort of reason why you found yourself not only attracted to the space, but staying in this space for your career?
I don't know that there's one particular thing. It was just always like, what's next and what can we do better? Okay. And my favorite role in HR, I found I had a niche, and it was to go to work for companies that had an HR department that could do so much better. I didn't want to go and work for a company that had a box and you had to follow inside the box. I wanted to go work for companies that you had the ability to create what the HR department should be, and then eventually, leave a legacy if you decide to leave.
Absolutely, yeah.
People could remember you for the things that you achieved while you were there, and how you had the ability to change the culture of that company because of the best practices you brought to the company.
That's cool. And so when did this crazy idea of employee benefits and insurance enter your purview?
So I started working in HR over 25 years ago, like I said, and early in my HR career, in my 20s, I would sit through meetings. I really didn't understand. It was fully funded, and I remember meeting with one of the carriers, and then as I got more immersed in my career, then I was sitting in renewal meetings, and again, still fully funded. And I remember thinking to myself after a couple years getting more familiar with the data and the information, like, I don't understand this fuzzy math they're doing. And there were these manual adjustments, and I just couldn't understand how we were making decisions without having any data to make a decision with.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? I mean, I'm right there with you. It's like, make a decision on the second or third biggest line item on your P&L for most employers. Get with no data. Here's a number we're going to tell you it's going to cost you next year, and this is what we're going to charge you. Maybe there's some wiggle room in negotiation, but then you do it all over again, and you do it all over again the next year.
Exactly. And I call it the healthcare definition of insanity. And it's unfortunate that companies are still doing that to this day. But after I worked with a company that was fully funded for several years, it was like 11 and a half years, I was really immersed at that point, and I had an opportunity to go work with another family-owned company as the vice president of HR. Okay. But they were self-funded. I had never worked in the self-funded space before.
Okay.
So they were self-funded with Cigna. And I did have a fear because I had never worked in self-funded. I didn't know what it meant. But when I got into it, I realized that, okay, there are plan designs. It looked just like a fully funded plan, but I knew that we had control over what the plan design looked like. We were able to make decisions that were in the best interest for the employees and the company. However, still, we didn't have all the data to make informed decisions. So that kind of made me scratch my head a little bit.
Yeah, and I want to, before we go fully into that, I want to take a step back in that fully insured world. So
Pareto Health is the manager of the largest employee benefits group captive in the United States. And it's also now the main sponsor of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. I chose to partner with Pareto Health for three main reasons. Number one, their dedication to improving the world of health benefits. Number two, their mission to reduce volatility and to make self-funding simple for mid-sized employers. And number three, the strength and scale of their program. With over 2,300 member groups and more than $1 billion of stop-loss premium under management, Pareto Health is the most robust solution of its kind in the country, period. Stay tuned for more information because I'm sure I'll be featuring them on an episode of the podcast very soon. Visit Pareto Health at paretohealth.com or follow them on LinkedIn to stay up to date on the latest news and developments.
I fully insured, fully funded, whatever terminology you ultimately want to use. We talked a little bit about the limitations, but at that time, because that's sort of what you knew inside the four walls of that organization, that's probably what we thought of as insurance. Did you ever have a suspicion, though, that there could be something else out there? Did you ever catch wind before you joined that other organization that self-funding existed? Or was the kind of presumption is that this is what our broker's bringing to the table and this is how insurance works?
It actually was the latter. So It was, we're fully funded and this is what was brought to the table. Mm-hmm. So I heard about self-funding conceptually because of studying, during HR certification classes or what have you, or seminars or webinars, but I never really understood what it meant.
Yeah. Well, did you, kudos to you, by the way, for going out and finding out what's out there. But what were some of the things that you could do inside that fully funded plan to try to counteract the costs going up? Like, talk to me because you're constrained to a degree, right? But were you able to make any changes, or did it always feel like you were chasing your tail a little bit?
For sure, we felt like we were always chasing our tail because every year you have to renew. Mm-hmm. And we had maybe 2 or 3 plans to choose from that would fit, number one, what our spend wanted to be, what was happening with our employee demographic. And I always had an issue every year trying to figure out the best way to tell my employees, hey, by the way, mm-hmm. your premiums are going up and we're so sorry, but you're going to have to pay more and you're getting less. And I remember saying to my HR colleagues of the department I ran, I have to put my suit of armor on because I don't want to have to tell my employees this again.
And the biggest thing is you don't know why. You don't know why.
Right.
Why. That is the biggest thing. And I get frustrated, right? And you obviously know my passion about this. But it's I don't know why my costs are going up because I don't have data that tells me.
Correct.
I just know they're telling me that I have to pay more next year. And then you have to be the bad guy or the bad gal and go out there and communicate that to your employees. Ultimately, it looks like it's your fault, right? Because you weren't able to help control the cost of healthcare, but it's because you're not given any information. You're not given any tools in order to do that.
And one of the things I do remember was being given a wellness allowance every year and thinking, wow, we're being given money, and it was significant, mm-hmm. like 10 or 15,000 that we can invest back in the plan. But looking back now, we were still paying for that money. Nobody was giving anything for free. Yeah. We were paying, and probably 2 or 3 times, that $10,000 we were paying for that. And really it didn't yield any significant results in the health and well-being overall for our employees. So
I can't wait to come to the present day when you've got some tools that are actually helping in the wellness world. But let's stair step our way there. So let's go back to when you were getting us into the organization that you joined that was already self-funded, and you got introduced to this concept. What were kind of some of the eye-opening moments that may have happened? Was it a data thing? Was it a choice thing? What did you learn and what did you discover when you went to that organization?
So the first thing that was an aha moment was, wow, these plan designs look similar to what it would have looked like in a fully funded world, mm-hmm. but yet we get to create a plan design that was fitting for our culture and our demographics. That was the first thing. And the second thing was that, we didn't have all the data sets that we should have had, but we had some data.
Some, yeah.
Some.
Was it all bundled together with Cigna at that time? You mentioned Cigna earlier.
It was.
Okay.
It was.
And it's not even singling them out, but if you are bundled, right, Cigna, just to explain that for the folks that don't know, they're doing the administration, correct, the pharmacy,
Yes.
providing the stop-loss insurance, the access to the network. And so it can look and feel very, very similar to a fully insured plan when you do that, right? But there might be some limitations that you just described with data.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. So, but even some data is better than none, right? So were you able to dig into some of the claims and find out maybe what's driving your costs and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, some of the data that's typical drivers are, for example, people using the ER, as primary care. So you can, that was always a good data point to look at, because then maybe you look at increasing the ER copay,
Yep.
To coincide with the utilization that might be unnecessary. So there were some data points, but again, it's limited.
Well, how did you find it from your perspective as HR, right? Because this was your first introduction to self-funding, and we were talking off camera, kind of that experience of managing a self-funded plan. And if you've never done it before, a lot of HR professionals will hear, we hear it, I've heard it since I've been in this industry, oh, that sounds like a lot more work, right? Or it sounds complicated, I'm not sure if I can manage it. So talk to me about, did it add anything to your plate, or was it harder than you suspected?
Actually, no.
Really? It wasn't? Okay.
It wasn't. I didn't think so, because to the employee, they don't understand that now the company is the bank account for the claims, right? So it's a different funding mechanism, but that's not transparent to the employee. So to the employee, the benefit facing them, it looks the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, that's the first key thing that I realized, that it's not a bad thing, it's actually a great thing, because we had more flexibility to run our plan the way we felt it would be best utilized.
Okay. When you transitioned over there when it was already self-funded.
It was self-funded.
Right, so you weren't necessarily there from the transition from fully insured to self-funded.
Correct.
Okay, yeah. Because that is one of those ones. And have you experienced that yourself, the transition from those two environments?
No.
Okay. Yeah, because so sometimes that is what we hear, but since you didn't have that particular experience, we'll move on. But other than the data, like, what did it feel like from a kind of a monthly or quarterly perspective? Were you finding out like you were being privy to more information than you got before? Was it helping drive your strategy as an HR professional?
So knowing what I know now, the answer is absolutely not.
Okay.
So, yeah.
How come?
There was definitely an awakening of what I thought was an even better situation a few years ago was not so much better.
Okay.
So I was very blessed to be part of a huge transition when I was with that company.
Okay, and so then how long were you there when in that kind of signal program and with that organization?
So we moved from Cigna self-funded to a non-traditional plan, which I know we're going to talk about because I get very excited.
Yeah.
So that aha moment came in 2016. We started vetting this new outside-the-box type of plan, and we went live with it September of 17.
Okay.
So it did take a little bit of time to vet that new concept because it was an outside-the-box way of thinking.
Was this something your company proactively brought to the table, or was it something your consultant was helping you build a strategy around?
So the consultant we were working with at the time did not bring it to us.
Okay.
It was a different company, and they actually approached us because they had similar size employers, and they thought it's something that we might be interested in. So a couple of the folks from our company went and sat in a symposium and learned about it and brought it back to the company. And at first, I was not having any of it.
Okay, how come?
When I listened to the pitch and I listened to the way that the plan would be structured, and it felt like a too good to be true scenario. And, when you work in HR, you sometimes become cynical or a skeptic about certain things. So it was certainly something that was scary.
Okay. Was it too good to be true because of maybe the savings potential?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, let's describe that setup, right? Before I ask some follow-up questions, when you describe a non-traditional, right? So when you use those words, what did that kind of look like? What were some of the components of that plan when you go that route?
So we were able to, use a TPA.
Okay.
And in our case, at the time, the company was called GPA and ELAP,
Yep.
who have become Imagine 360. And I want to take a step back a second,
please,
though,
yeah.
and tell you back in 2017 when we got a renewal with Cigna. It was an 18% renewal.
Okay.
Again, we were self-funded.
Yeah.
But we were all thinking, how are we getting an 18% renewal when we've been doing everything that was suggested? Our claims didn't look a ton worse, and we just couldn't wrap our heads around the math,
Yeah.
right? Again, this fuzzy math. And not having data to really support what was going on, how did that outcome come about? So it was at that point where we really took a deep dive into reference-based pricing.
Oh, really? Okay.
And that was when we made the decision to switch. And I know that a lot of companies are fearful of making changes because it is scary and change is hard. But the reality is, on the other side of it, it was the most rewarding experience I have had in human resources.
No kidding.
My whole career. It was a revitalization.
Okay. Well, then we're going to have to dig into that. So, in your words, right, I've covered reference-based pricing before, but I would love to hear kind of you explain it since you've lived it, you've experienced it. Reference-based pricing to you, what does that mean?
Okay, so there were a lot of lessons learned as we were transitioning from fully funded in a traditional BUCA healthcare system to reference-based pricing. Like I said, I felt like it was a too good to be true, so I really needed to understand what it meant. And I had, like I said, a lot of lessons learned. I didn't realize that when claims are processed with one of the big carriers, there's nobody looking at them, so they're auto-adjudicated.
Yes.
So those carriers are just processing claims without putting eyes on them. In the reference-based pricing world, somebody is looking at every claim and auditing it to make sure that the services performed, in particular at facilities, because that's what's driving most of the plan costs, right, for a healthcare plan, that if you had a knee replacement and they used 4 screws in the operating room, that's all you were charged for. They are going to audit the operating room notes.
Yep.
And if there is a discrepancy and you were charged for 10 screws, you're not going to pay for 10 screws. So there was somebody that was going to look out for you. But not only that, we are all, as a country, being overcharged for services.
Absolutely.
Working with one of the big carriers, right? So they typically brag about a 55% discount on services, and what happens in the reference-based pricing space is you're looking at like a 70% discount on services for the same thing because they're using a Medicare reimbursement rate,
Right.
plus they're paying the facility a profit.
Yep.
And I didn't realize that we were paying so much more because there's no defined pricing in a hospital setting. So hospital A is selling or providing a CT scan for one amount, and hospital B, 10 miles down the road, is charging 5 times more just because they can.
Just because they can.
And the real aha moment came when we were trying to vet out the whole process, when we said, okay, it was kind of a show me.
Yeah.
Like, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yep.
Because I was a skeptical HR person.
Okay.
So we said, okay, we had an EOB that was run with Cigna, one of our colleagues had, and we ran that same code, medical code, through the RBP plan. It was significantly less. So it was that moment I started understanding just how misaligned the healthcare system is, where I'm like, that's impacting me as not only an employee, but as a mom, and I have a special needs son. And, I pay for services, and if this has an opportunity to not only save our company money, more importantly, it's going to save our employees a heck of a lot of money. At the end of the day, that was something to really grab onto and learn.
Well, what's funny, I saw your passion coming out there. I can tell how much it meant to you. it's one of those things, and I've had that moment myself when, like, once you see it and once you know it, you can't unknow it. And it's one of those situations where you become frustrated. You almost go through the stages of grief, right? It's denial, and then it's anger, et cetera. And, anger is a really good fuel to get you to do things. But then you come around and go, then there's that acceptance moment. And then it's like, you know what, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make as many people aware as possible that this is happening. And then there are alternatives, right? So yes, it's happening. Here's why, here's how. Now here's what to do instead, right? And the more people know the what to do instead, and it doesn't have to be reference-based pricing, but that's an excellent tool to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. But you have to be aware of what is happening today. And if you're not mad, you're just not paying attention.
Well, and like I say, I don't know any company that writes a check and not have a line-by-line description of what it is you're paying for, because we pay invoices based on information of something we're buying, and we want to make sure that we're verifying the price that we were informed it was going to be. I don't know any other product on the planet where you're paying for something and you don't know what you're paying for. And it's like you said, it's the second largest line item that a company has, but yet they will stroke a check every month for, a fully insured program or even self-insured with a big carrier without having data to support what those costs are for.
Well, and it's not only that too. I mean, just think of the shell game of discounts in the first place, right? Discounts off of what?
Correct.
Right? I can give you a 99% discount off something that's $1 million, and it'll still cost more than if you paid a cash equivalent or if you knew what the price is up front. So they do that to go, we've got the best discounts. But yeah, you might be being billed more than if I was with Aetna or if I was with Blue Cross. And so you're billed more and your discount is bigger, but the end that you pay is actually the allowable might actually be more than your competitor. So the discount has no bearing on what's actually paid. It means nothing.
Because you're still, it's like when you go to a store, your favorite store, and something you love is on sale, but really
30% off, right?
Yeah, but then they jacked up the price probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you still feel good you're getting a discount.
I can't tell you how many times my wife will be like, but I saved 30%.
Right.
I'm like, no. How much did you spend? That's what we need to think about, is how much you spend. But I digress there.
Yes.
So
PlanSite is a complete game changer in the world of insurance brokering. As a broker, you know how time-consuming and error-prone the traditional RFP process can be. But what if I told you there's a better way? PlanSite is the only end-to-end RFP solution on the market made specifically for benefits agencies. It's like having a superpower that gets you an average of 8 to 10 hours back per employer renewal per year. And the best part? PlanSite supports all carriers, all funding types, and all group sizes for over 20 different benefits. If you're ready to make your RFP process faster, more efficient, and more profitable, it's time to call PlanSite. Visit plansite.com now to book a free demo and discover the future of insurance renewals.
Reference-based pricing, though, the one thing that you commonly hear concerns about is how disruptive this may be, what is the employee experience, and then we'll obviously talk about things like balanced bills. But walk me through that, because as you were saying, maybe this is too good to be true. Were some of those things concerns that you had as an employer?
Well, absolutely, because again, I'm an HR professional that will look out for not only the company, right? We all want our company to save money. More importantly, how it affects our employees. But I also wanted to mention that, when I left my last company, after the first year of savings, because this is a whole storyboard here. So after that first year, we went with reference-based pricing. We had saved over $1 million in the first year.
Out of maybe a total spend of what? Like, do you remember approximately?
I don't. It's been several years, but I want to say estimated maybe about $3 million.
Okay.
Maybe less.
Wow. Well, that's
However,
a significant amount of money. Okay.
It is a significant amount of money, and to be able to prove that something worked that you were initially hesitant about, that's a big deal. But the more important part of that is that the employees experienced great service, quality health care, their benefits were the same if not better, and then having money to reinvest back into the employee benefit program, that's huge.
Absolutely.
So when I left that company in 2019, I went on the broker side for a little while.
You did? Okay.
I did.
Okay.
I did. I went on the dark side for a little
What drew
while.
you to the broker side, out of curiosity?
I'm sorry?
What drew you to the broker side?
Well, at the time, I had been working, like I said, in HR a long time, and I just fell in love with healthcare.
Okay.
And I fell in love with the fact that there was a solution that would be meaningful, right? Not only for companies to save money, but for employees. And I was realizing that there were so many other solutions available, and I wanted to be part of that have that impact. You know, I felt something was coming. This is a big deal. I want to be part of it. So that was what drew me to work on that side. And, you know, unfortunately, I didn't end up staying in that space very long. And I ended up back as a consultant. And I was working with a person who had just started her consulting business a few months before that. And I was her first employee number one. And she said to me, hey, we have an opportunity to go work at Hendry Marine. They're looking for a fractional HR director.
Okay.
And they want to consider us for the proposal. And I was like, okay, great. That sounds good.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about the maritime industry, but I did work most of my career in blue-collar industrial HR. Love it.
Okay.
And we sat with the owners of the company, the CFO, the controller, and several other executives, and I asked them the question. I said, well, you know, I'm curious, what kind of benefits do you have? And the CFO looked at me and he said, well, you know, we just implemented this plan and we're at the end of our first year of it and our employees are still getting used to it.
Yeah.
I said, well, what is it?
Yeah, what is it?
And he said, well, we're working with GPA and ELAP.
Okay.
And I leaned forward and looked at him and I said, you have got to be kidding me. I love that plan and I've been doing that for 3 years. It's like the best program a company could consider.
Yeah.
You know, considering all the challenges. And he looked at me like I had 3 heads. And that's how I ended up at Hendry Marine. And after 5 months, they ended up hiring me full time.
Okay, so you loved it. It sounds like my suspicion is he was dealing with some headaches or some growing pains of moving into reference-based pricing.
Yeah.
So is that why he looked at you so funny initially?
I think it was because they weren't expecting to meet someone that knew exactly
Fair, yeah.
what it was he was talking about, because it's one of those things that it's still scary to a lot of companies.
Sure.
But yeah, I had been in it and immersed in it for 3 years, and I
Yeah.
went on the broker side and did that for a little bit, and I was ready to go.
Well, you must have been a godsend for him, for sure.
Yes.
So let's talk about that, because I do want to address it, right? And these are common things that are said, and I think hearing it from the employer's perspective, ultimately, maybe there are some pain points, maybe there's some challenges, maybe the education is required, but often I think a lot of those might be overstated. I've never personally experienced a reference-based pricing from the inside, a plan from the inside, so I do want to hear kind of what that experience is like, good and bad, pros and cons, so that somebody that might be listening to it that's interested or has never heard of it before
Right.
will have a real reality perspective of what it would be like. So
Right.
kind of give me all the spectrum of RBP for you.
Okay, so I started in December of 19 with Hendry, and again, they were completing their first full year of being reference-based pricing. However, they still had CVS Caremark as their PBM. Now, the horse is out of the barn, open enrollment is on its way, it's going,
Yeah.
right? January 1, we are RBP with GPA, ELAP, who it was at the time, and CVS Caremark as the PBM. So off the bat, I knew that I was going to have some work to do because I would not have personally implemented a CVS Caremark or CVS PBM with the RBP piece.
Yep.
But I wrote it out in 2020, and when renewal came in 21, we ended up making a switch to a new PBM.
Okay.
And off the bat, that alone, we had a 30% cost savings.
So just switching the PBM alone, say
Correct.
30%. Fantastic.
Yeah. So the reference-based pricing piece is working.
Okay.
The employees, yes, change is hard. And the real disruption comes when you as a company are not thorough in the communication strategy.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that we weren't, but it is a process and it's a transition.
Yeah.
And it does not happen overnight. But the real aha moments for your employees come when they get their EOBs and they see what the facility wanted to charge for a service, and what the actual, you have your billed charges, and then you have your actual charges to the plan and the charge to the member, they could see it's significantly less. As long as they pay their copay, co-insurance deductible, they're good to go.
Yeah.
And also many plans don't have the support and advocacy like ours does. So an employee who gets a balanced bill, and again, as long as they met their shared portion and responsibility, they had an advocate through ELAP to help facilitate resolution of the balance bill.
Can you explain that for people that know what is a balance bill? Because that is one of those objections you hear sometimes with reference-based pricing is my employees might get a balance bill. So what is that?
So essentially what it is if you go to a facility for services and you pay your portion and the insurance company that you're insured with pays their portion, you get some surprise bill that the hospital still wants you to pay without providing proof, but it's something that you shouldn't have to pay. They're overbilling you for services.
And that's going to the member, right?
That's going to the member.
Right.
And in a traditional healthcare setting, there is no one to help you advocate to shut it down, right? You have to pay it, or you try to fight it or ask for documentation to support why you're being billed that. And 99.9% of the time, you're not able to get that information.
Right.
So again, it's like, you've already met your responsibility for your out-of-pocket. You shouldn't owe any more money. And what really started concerning me as I was getting more in depth in the healthcare industry and benefits and this space was how many millions of Americans are in debt, because of medical bills, and even worse, that people are not going or avoiding care because they can't afford it.
Absolutely.
That's not a sustainable model, and it's unfair.
Well, the percentages I've heard is that 60 some odd percent of folks that file for bankruptcy because of medical debt. And about 80% of those people actually had insurance at the time those claims were incurred. And so it's not a function of not having insurance, it's a function of being underinsured or being unable to actually afford their cost share component of that. And so that I see that as an obvious systemic issue within healthcare in the United States, and it's a shameful almost at this point.
It really
in this country
is
that's happening.
And it's almost like a bullying tactic.
Yeah.
And the one thing that really meant a lot and means a lot to me is to be able to educate my employers as smarter consumers. And again, like as consumers of any product, right? We spend time researching what kind of TV we want to buy at Best Buy or whatever it is, and we'll spend time and we'll be thoughtful about what we're buying and we want the features of that certain TV, but yet we don't spend a lot of time really evaluating what's in it for us in our healthcare program, but you're paying for it every week or bi-weekly, whatever your payroll deduction cycle is, but that is a concern. So having the opportunity to educate the employees about the value proposition of what it is they're receiving, and that's huge.
Yeah.
But that's ongoing. It doesn't stop.
Yeah, I was going to say, talk to me about the education process, because I do think that's absolutely crucial. And so early on, I'm sure you get lots of questions and people have a little bit of insecurity or doubt about this and go, what are they doing? And so you probably have to sort of provide reassurance and ease them through the process. But like ongoing education or even initial education, I'd love to hear what you did specifically to ensure that it was a successful transition.
Yeah, so I actually have a couple of good, funny stories.
Okay,
So
yeah.
when I was with my last company before Hendry, what was interesting was we had made the decision to switch directly from being self-insured with Cigna directly to being self-insured RBP with GPA and ELAP.
Okay.
Now, that in mind, we wrote our initial rollout presentation for our open enrollment meetings. And we had 14 locations, so it was going to be a divide and conquer strategy because we couldn't get to everybody, right? Within the week, we wanted to do the meetings. And we wrote the presentation, and we decided, the executive team was on board, and now we're going to present it to our middle management team. Okay. And they heard the presentation, and I remember one guy raised his hand. He goes, "That is so great that the company is going to save money, but what's in it for the employees? How is it going to impact us?" And we were like, "Oh my goodness!" Like we totally were sending the wrong message.
Right.
So we rewrote the presentation and we flipped the script, and then we wrote it to be very employee facing. So they understood the value of what the plan was that we were getting into. But not only that, but what we were faced with, which was the 18% increase with Cigna, that we explored other options, and we found one that we thought was going to be more valuable and add more quality benefits to their employment experience than we had previously been given them. And when we explained it that way and we told a story, it went over so well, to the point where we had multiple managers helping us send and do the presentations at some of the offices. Because the reality is, if your messaging to your employees fails from the top, it's going to be a failure.
The adoption's, going to stink. And when I look at that too, and it's such a great call, we were talking about the philosophy of whether or not, a self-funded employer should share with their employees whether or not they are self-funded. And, kind of I'm leaning towards now that that's a conversation that should be had for a multitude of reasons. But in that situation, it does need explaining, right? Because it's not just we're trying to save money, guys, right? Which is obviously every business needs to do the best they can to constrain those costs. But our goal is to provide you better benefits over the long haul as well. And we believe this is the vehicle that can accomplish that. In doing so, if you want us to continue to offer you great benefits over year after year after year, we need your help. We need you to participate. We need you involved, and we need you to be educated, because we're all in this family or this company together. And I think that conversation is worthy to have. And then that almost gives them a sense of ownership and pride, and they're participating in that outcome. But you have to educate them. They need to be aware in the first place so that they're making the choices that they need to make to help the plan, right?
Exactly. And what was very rewarding after the first year, and again, I'm back at my last company, after the first year, we went back out for open enrollment. This is year 2 now. I will never forget the moment. I had an employee in our one location, it was Jacksonville, Florida. He raised his hand as we're talking about renewing, right, with GPA and ELAP and staying RBP. And he told me how grateful he was for the plan that we implemented because his wife had to have knee surgery. And he told us, or me, that one of the nurse advocates from the plan called his wife to speak to her prior to surgery, give her support, post-surgery called her, and then called her again to check on her. And to hear that really validated that what we did was the right thing, because our employees were getting more support. Not only, we talk about the balance billing being a challenge and having someone advocate on the plan for them, but also just the touch points. Because if you're in a traditional healthcare plan, most of the time you're calling, you're in a call queue, and you get somebody on the phone. We don't know who they are or where they are. And a lot of times if you have to call back, good luck finding that same person. Whereas in this model, you're actually assigned to someone, and they are walking you through from point A to point B, where you need to go.
So you have a dedicated service person. That's great, right? Because there's that continuity of the life cycle of the claim.
Care,
and the person.
And that gives them a sense of security.
That's great.
ClaimDoc is a medical claim auditing and member advocacy company. We provide fiduciary services to employer-sponsored benefit plans, and allowing them to create an environment where we ensure that the benefit plans are being charged in a fair and reasonable basis.
My business is basically people, and it become a real simple transition. We thought it was going to be far more complex. I've saved, we'll say, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I could not say enough about ClaimDoc.
And how do you iterate within a reference-based pricing plan? So once you do it, right, and now you've got it going, and you've had a couple of years experience. I noticed, by the way, your bracelet says evolve, right? So the evolution of how do you...
That's my word of 2024.
Okay, well, then we said it out loud. Evolve is your word of 2024.
Put it in the universe.
Well, how do you evolve an RBP plan over time? Do you continuing to try to tinker with it a little bit?
That's a great question. This is where I get real. I get excited about this.
Talk, because I know you every year, or probably every month, or every week, you might be thinking of new things to do. So how do you tinker with an RBP plan to try to make it just a little bit better each year?
So first and foremost, the beauty of being self-funded in this space, which is outside of non-traditional, is the data.
The data.
The data. It's all about the data. So, people talk about healthcare plan strategies, and you can't create a strategy without data to kind of let you know where you've been, and then where you are, and then where you're going. And I compare it to a company that they put together sales plans or operation objectives. Like, it should be comparable to what companies do in that same respect. Because it's a huge spend. So in that case, now let's talk about Hendry, because I got there, like I said, in 2019, 2020, wrote it out, 21, we switch our PBM. So we're stair-stepping, right?
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to make a lot of changes all at once. So in 2021, we changed the PBM. Now here's the crazy thing. So our plan had been working so well financially and for the employees that we actually had a surplus of over $1 million. So what that means to everybody who doesn't understand that is we over accrued for our healthcare spend. I don't know how many companies can say that they over accrued and had money to reinvest back into the plan.
Well, certainly not when they're fully funded.
No.
Yeah.
No. Even self-funded in a lot of cases, when you're still restricted and confined to the same rules, in a regular BUCA situation. But another aha moment came in July of 21 when we were reviewing our mid-year data. Again, all about the data. So we're looking through the data, and glaring right at me was the fact that our preventative wellness benefit, which is covered 100% under the ACA, was extremely underutilized. And by that I mean 15% of our whole population was using it. And digging a little deeper, the majority of the 15% were dependents. It wasn't even our employees.
Okay. And that this is maybe, you said, a little bit of a function of your industry in the blue collar. I do want to touch on that in a moment. We can kind of expand from here. But ultimately, when you're working in a blue collar environment, that may suggest population, right? Age of the population, probably mostly male, et cetera. And so do you think that played into that lack of, if you will, utilization or using the preventative care benefits themselves?
So absolutely.
Okay.
So Hendry Marine Industries is a holding company for Gulf Marine Repair and Anchor Sandblasting and Coating. So we are a shipyard at the Port of Tampa. We have about 300 employees, and the majority of our employees are male, and they are late to mid 40s and early 50s from a demographic standpoint. So going back to the data and having such a low utilization for the preventative wellness visits and benefit, that was very concerning, because in my mind it was, oh my God, we have a bunch of potential ticking time bombs walking around.
Absolutely.
And one thing I wanted to preface that with was, before I got to Hendry, they were fully funded for many years, and their aha moment came, when they got a renewal and it was significantly high and started moving in this direction. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because they had about 25 to 30 high dollar claimants.
25 to 30?
Yes, sir. Yes.
And how many employees in the?
Back then, I would be guessing, but I'm guesstimating somewhere between 300 and 400 covered lives.
Ooh, that's a lot of high cost claimants. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Wow.
But let's move forward now, and we're now in reference-based pricing space, and over the course of the last few years, we've seen that number go down drastically.
Okay.
Now, granted, people retire, unfortunately some people pass away, but of course, as the plan is working favorably, not only for the employees, but the company, those costs are shifting and they're going down.
Absolutely.
So the stop losses aren't that great, right? So we're not having as many. But going back to the data, so we decided that we wanted to find care that was convenient for the employees. And I know there's a lot of talk about near-site care and direct primary care, but our vision was to find something that was literally the most convenient way for our employees to access health care.
Okay.
That was the vision that we had.
Okay.
So about a month later, I was at a conference and I saw the walk-on clinic. That's run by Chris Yarn.
You powered
Frank Mike Droppa,
Chris Yarn. I actually, this was Miami, right? You powered in Miami?
That conference back in 2021, it was the HR Florida conference.
Oh, okay. Oh, very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So Chris, they're based in Florida, right?
They are.
Okay.
But they are able to deploy units all over the country.
Yeah.
However, it was on the floor, on the exhibit hall floor, And I looked at it and I said, that's what we need. And it was just immediate that I had a vision,
Yeah.
to put it in the shipyard because it's mobile. The unit that we wanted had 3 rooms, and as long as we were able to find someone who was bilingual, on the primary side as well as a medical assistant, we were good to go.
Well, so let's explain, because I got a chance. The reason I was asking if you powered in Miami is where you saw, because that's where I got a chance to meet Chris Yarn, and he actually had one parked outside.
Yes.
And it was super cool. He would give you a tour, and I'd heard of his model, but I hadn't seen it firsthand, right? And so for the folks that aren't really familiar, these are mobile clinics. Picture almost like a 18-wheeler trailer, if you will, that they have converted into mobile doctor's offices,
Correct.
right? And so you can pick a 2-suite or a 3-suite or a 4-suite. But the idea is you can have it on site, a couple of days a week, permanently on site,
Right.
maybe once a month it comes around depending on your needs. And so that mobility and flexibility makes it where they can bring the care to you without having that full expense of building out a true traditional on-site clinic that's permanent, right?
Right. And that's the thing, because, and I will say this is one of the greatest achievements I've had in my HR career, because in the past, I've been at companies where, it would be great to build a clinic on site, but to do a brick and mortar clinic, not only is the out-of-pocket cost tremendous, but the ROI could be 3 to 5 years. Whereas, when I saw this unit, I thought, okay, it's mobile. It can come on site. We have a perfect spot for it. And we just have to work out the details.
Yeah.
And Mike, who is the business development director for the clinic, he still laughs at me to this day, because when I met him and I knew that was the, strategy we wanted to implement at the shipyard, I didn't tell him that at the conference, but he knew I was excited about it. And I actually reached out to him when I got back to the office, and I said, I don't normally reach out to vendors, but I was so excited by what you guys are doing. I really want to have a meeting right away. And he laughs at me because, that's not normally usually the vendors
as a
are calling you.
My goodness, those are rare circumstances.
Yeah.
But you were sold from the moment you saw it, right? Because it
I
just
was.
made sense. And for your needs, it made absolute sense. So how has it gone? Talk to me about the rollout.
It's just interesting. So again, that was August of 21, and we implemented it in January of 22.
Okay.
And you've gotten to know me a little bit, right? So I'm positive, I'm an optimistic person, and I thought, okay, if we build it, they will come.
Yeah.
We're going to put this on site, and everybody's going to want to use it. Yeah. Boy, was I mistaken. So the problem was that initially, the employees were wondering, why does the company want to know about my medical situations? So there was definitely a barrier to the employees being comfortable using it. So we decided we were going to do something crazy and different. And number one, we decided a few months from when we kicked it off, and that was January of 22. In April of 22, we were going to have our first annual health and financial wellness fair, because at this point, our vendors are really involved in our healthcare plan strategy. Now the walk-on clinic is here. So we decided we were going to offer 5 days of paid time off.
Okay.
For any employee that went to do their preventative wellness exam in between the time that program was kicked off and to the time we had our wellness event in April. So our utilization of the clinic really spiked at that point, because people were really concerned about not their health as much as winning the PTO. But what happened during that time is something that still really makes me very emotional. We actually had 2 employees that found out about life-threatening illnesses they had no idea they had.
Really? Okay.
So one goes in, again, trying to win the PTO, and the doctor says to him, did you know you had a lump in your neck? He had no idea.
So he had a lump?
He had cancer.
Oh, okay.
Thank goodness he's healthy and well,
Yeah.
and, had that not been caught, because the clinic was there, who knows what would have happened. And the other employee went in, and his blood sugar was so high that he was almost at stroke level.
Jeez.
So
those things were caught because the clinic was there.
They were caught because the clinic was there. And, it's been a couple years, and we have other stories that are, the success for the patients who are our employees, but there is a strategy related to putting that kind of clinic on site.
Yep.
So early on, we decided that we were not going to ask the employees to clock out or use any PTO.
Okay.
So they go on company time. They don't pay to go to the clinic. We have their dependents, as long as they're covered on the health care plan and they're age 16 or older, they're able to come on site as well and use the clinic. Whereas initially it was, let's do preventative wellness and some acute care. We've expanded services over the past couple of years, and we started doing blood work.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Last year. At the end of 23, we also incorporated a colon test. It doesn't replace a colonoscopy, but it actually can identify markers by blood work if there are any concerns for colon cancer. So it's better than someone not doing anything.
Sure.
And we've had great participation with that, but the numbers we've seen as a result of implementing that strategy are tremendous. So, we have hard and soft dollar ROI, but in totality, we're looking at close to $500,000 in ROI over the past 2 years.
Sure.
Because we have employees that are not having to take their time, we have their family members using it. It's a great recruiting and retention tool.
Yeah.
But even more importantly, one of the things that we really wanted to do was have the data related to what was going on in the clinic. So we do file, or the clinic files, ghost claims, we call them.
Okay.
So they're $0 claims that don't hit our health care plan. And I should have stated that we're with Imagine 360, and that was a nice, a nice adaption for me because I had been with them, and I've been with them for 7 years. So
That's what ELAP
ELAP and GPA
turned
became
into
Imagine 360.
Yeah, okay.
So it was so nice for me because it's basically like I took my team from my last company, moved to this company, and boom, we're off and running. And but they know me well enough to know that I'm always going to look for data to help drive the plan strategy. So we created a way to file the ghost claims.
So you file, and that way you can track the claim avoidance, right, or the cost
Correct.
avoidance as a result. So you can track
Right.
the CPT codes and things, or ICD-9 and 10 codes, right? So
Yeah, so they're rolling up to the aggregate
Yeah,
data
yeah,
reports, and we're
yeah.
able to identify other areas in the plan that need to be really taken care of.
Well, that's cool. That ROI is like really cool because you can draw the through line from, hey, we saved money, and then we know we probably also have possibly saved lives and things like that. And so those are things that you can't really, put a number on.
Right.
But it's the quality of life type things that you're giving to employees that I think they probably appreciate, right?
They do, and as a matter of fact, what's also really cool is that we didn't have to increase their premiums for 4 years. So due to the mechanics of the plan working so favorably, we're still able to provide a great benefit, quality care,
Yeah.
not increasing premiums, but yet still having $1 million savings or surplus in 21. We had a $500,000 savings in 22.
Wow.
Because of the ebb and flow of healthcare plans.
Yeah.
Well,
this is the nature of self-funding, right?
Right.
That you can have a year, 1 in 5 years, they say, is bad or worse than expected, right? And so it's not like the risk goes away. You're just managing and paying for risk differently. And so to be able to hold contributions of the employee premiums for 4 years in a row is a rarity. And at the same time, you're actually giving them better benefits and adding things to the fold as well, which I think is a common misconception that employers have, is that it's, those are mutually exclusive. You either have to make the benefits worse or you have to charge more money for the plan. You can actually make them better and have outcomes that are better simultaneously, which I think is really cool. And it's one of those things that doesn't get talked about enough.
Right.
So what are you guys doing today now? Because we're still talking a little bit in arrears, but what are you guys doing today with your plan, or what are you thinking about rolling out at the end of 24 or 2025? Because I know you're not going to stop.
No.
So what are some other things that you're talking about these days?
So we've actually added additional benefits into the benefit plans with Imagine 360 because they actually offer additional products in their, RBP program. So we actually added Regenex, which is an outside company.
Well, you know what? It's a funny story. Mark Testa, who's with Regenex, is a good friend of mine. He was here just literally yesterday.
Was he?
We did an MSK, so musculoskeletal
Very cool.
podcast. So I know Regenex really, really well.
Yeah, and I knew them with my last company. So having had that experience, we brought them in and implemented them last year. And I saw him recently at the U-Powered Symposium, so that was cool. And we also added Upland Advocacy, which is a division of Imagine 360. It's a separate company.
Okay.
But essentially what they do, which is really cool, is they provide advocacy for employees or their covered dependents that have an excessive healthcare spend or amount that they need to pay that might find sourcing or funding that they can help offset their out-of-pocket.
Yeah.
You know, anything that is helpful to the employees we want to try to help with. So we also have added Livongo. That was a couple of years ago, you know, but it's important to tell you that because Livongo is a diabetes program, but they also have a whole body program that addresses, you know, high blood pressure, weight management. And those are really important things because there's a tell in our PBM side that shows, you know, we have quite a bit of people with diabetes just based on the nature of the prescriptions that are being filled. So we wanted to make sure we were providing them with a resource to help manage the diabetes and, you know, give them resources to use at no cost.
Another example of data driving decisions and driving strategy, right?
Yeah, and to say in our space that our pharmacy cost is 11% of our total cost is also huge. So we're really proud of that. And the walk-on clinic is a huge part of our healthcare ecosystem.
Yeah.
And we're actually, in 2024, we're going to be rolling out carrying prescriptions on site. And it's not, I should back up and say we're not actually going to house prescriptions, but we have a local pharmacy that is going to fill prescriptions as needed.
That's super cool.
So, you know.
When I look at what you're doing, and I'm just going to kind of summarize what you're doing because I want to make sure people understand everything that you've got going on.
We're controlling our healthcare.
Yeah, you are literally controlling. It's almost like you're orchestrating your healthcare. But it's everything from reference-based pricing and working with a TPA and a vendor like Imagine 360. And there's other great ones out there. You obviously know I'm sponsored by ClaimDoc, but you have all under the fold, right? So you're actively managing the way that you pay for claims. You have an advocate that helps in a situation where that claim isn't paid or what a balance bill. You have somebody behind the scenes helping your employees.
Correct.
You added a clinic, a walk-on clinic, right? So now you got your preventative and your primary care and other components of that right on site, so there's no impediment. You've got you a carve-out PBM, right? So you have a transparent PBM that's helping you save 30-some-odd%. Now you're looking at on-site prescription fills. I mean, you are a unicorn to a degree, right? And I look at it from my perspective is when we think about the types of employers my company at Pareto would want, it's absolutely, you know, your profile is so rare. And so I just love what you do because I want to shine a light on what you guys are doing because not only is it working, but you've added an element of innovation to your plan that just doesn't, it's not stopping, right? You're not going, oh, we solved it and we're going to sit here now.
There is no magic bullet or magic wand that you can wave. It's all decisions based on the data that, you know, you need to have to make a very informed decision. And we've been very methodical about the things we've been doing. And that is how we make decisions. But at the end of the day, it's about taking care of the employees.
Well, what would you say? Because, I mean, I know a lot of my audience is consultants, right? But if you were to speak to an employer or a moment, you'd speak to the CFO, you'd speak to the director of HR that's considering or even listening to some of the things that we're talking about and going, oh, that's interesting, but I'm not sure. I mean, what are some of the things that you'd want to communicate to that person to either get them over the hump or to let them know that this type of stuff is out there?
Well, the fact is that I sat in the seat where HR people are sitting, where the concept of self-funding is very scary. But when you partner with the right consulting group, broker, whatever we're calling them these days, you know, they're going to guide you down the right path. And it's very important to reconsider who you're working with and the vendor partners that you align yourself with, because you want people that are going to work in the best interest for your employees. They have to know your employee type and the demographic. They have to know who you are and what you stand for as a company, because that means that they are in it for the right reasons.
Okay.
And that's where some of the misalignment, I think, has come in, where I remember in the past where some of the brokers would, really brag on the fact that they were whatever platinum status with a healthcare, company. And that, again, back then I was young and I was green. I'm like, wow, that's cool, But, looking back, I wish I had known about this sooner, but I am very grateful that I started down this journey 7 years ago because I feel like we're ahead of the curve.
Well, no, I'm glad you brought up misaligned incentives, and I think that's a great message to understand too. Is like when you start realizing how some folks in that ecosystem get paid, right? Especially a consultant, but at the end of the day, is still brokering in between a buyer and a seller. So you could call them a middleman, and it's not a pejorative, but they are in the middle of that equation. So depending on how they're arranged and how they get paid, right, that might ultimately influence some of the recommendations they make.
Right.
So let's say then not only are you innovative and tinkering all the time and coming up with great solutions, but the alignment of incentives, right? So that everybody that's participating in this strategy is being compensated appropriately, and it is not maybe confounding the recommendations that are being provided to you as well. I think that's crucial to understand, and I think the industry is moving this direction.
I agree.
I wouldn't even say slowly. It's happening pretty significantly at this point.
Yeah, I'm finding that I'm seeing a lot of content on LinkedIn, and I feel like, we're part of this bigger purpose or bigger movement. And I wanted to really mention, and I forgot earlier to talk to you about this, but, I became the vice chair for the Florida Alliance for Healthcare Value. And they're a 501c3 group that is working on behalf of employers in the state of Florida to really bring awareness of these type of issues and concerns that are happening in the healthcare industry, and also to really start demanding transparency in pricing and doing lobbying and things that are really meaningful for employers. And the reason I bring that up is because, yes, you can align yourself with a broker or a consultant, but also there are a lot of employer-facing groups that are trying to help each other. And that's why I wanted to join that group, is to really start helping other employers understand it doesn't have to be scary.
Do you consider yourself an advocate for employers?
Absolutely.
Okay. Is that something you enjoy doing?
I love it because, having worked in HR for so many years, I always wondered, and I'd always admire people that were up on stage doing a presentation at a conference, and I always thought, I wonder someday if there's something I can offer to my colleagues that would be so meaningful I could be up there too. And to have an opportunity to be on the podcast or speak at conferences, that means a lot to me because I know I'm helping for the greater good. And I know it sounds, kind of kooky, but it means something because a lot of people are struggling with healthcare. And
Well, and as I look at that, and I'm with you right there, and kind of the somewhat of my role here at Pareto, and then obviously with the podcast, and I've started public speaking around educating on self-funding. It is a mission, right? My goal is to help raise the tide, right? And so if ultimately if one employer per conference that I'm at, or one consultant who touches 50 employers is compelled by what I'm talking about, and it changes the way that they do things, you can keep doing that and keep doing that. And eventually we get to a critical mass where this is normal and everybody understands it, and it becomes the standard, the status quo, right? And right now we're fighting against the status quo that hasn't worked for anybody except the people that provide the insurance in the first place. So what I feel is I'm doing the similar thing to you, is I just want to introduce everybody to this and make them feel like, hey, I'm not the only one, and this can be done, and it has been done, and it's not as complicated as it sounds. And eventually, if that sways them to make this type of change for their plan, then they get to have that come to fruition in terms of cost savings and better benefits for everybody that they employ. I think that's a mission. I really do.
It is a mission. And when I think about, HR always being defined as a cost center for a company, there are strategies that we've implemented, of course, in the healthcare space where we can proudly say, hey, we're helping become a profit center for the company. We are helping contribute to the bottom line because we understand the numbers. We understand what's going on. and it's such a huge line item.
Yeah.
And I would encourage employers, to really get their HR people more involved. If they're not as involved, align with your CFO. My CFO and I, talk a lot about our healthcare strategy. And again, both of us, it's really important for the employees, but we have to encourage employers to really take a look at who they're working with.
Yep.
From a consultative standpoint for benefits, and if it's your golf person or your brother-in-law or somebody, that's part of your family, you have to really pause and ask yourself if they're providing you with all of the solutions that can really help overcome some of the healthcare challenges. And I know that's, tough, but at the end of the day, you as a
Well, you're running
leader,
a business.
yeah,
We're talking about
you-
millions, if not sometimes tens of millions of dollars, right?
I've seen us save millions and millions of dollars off of billed charges that ultimately, save money for the employee. They're out of pocket, and it works.
And it worked. Well, so, in the interest of, I know we've been going for a while and we've covered a lot of ground, which I think is awesome, right? And I can't thank you enough for not only making the effort to come down here, but to lend the voice of the employer, which I think is unfortunately, the one that I don't get to shine enough light on because I just don't have access to the Rolodex of employers as much as I'd like. But you guys are it's such a crucial to hear from the people that actually are putting these things in motion and experiencing them and paying for them. And so I can't, again, thank you enough. But as we move towards the end, kind of thinking about closing thoughts, what is one or two things that you want to leave the audience with?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
I love this question because it's almost like, hey, let's summarize what we just talked about for an hour. But what do you think is so important for people to know?
Well, the fact is that everyone that works in the healthcare space really needs to take a good hard look at what they are doing to help move forward and helping contribute to the best interest of the employers they're working with, or the employees that companies are supporting. And I ultimately want every employer to really understand that this is a misaligned, broken system.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a movement, and there are a lot of people like yourself that really are working in the best interests for, the people that live in the U.S.,
Yeah.
and we may not come up with a perfect solution, and there's not one perfect solution for every company, but, everybody just needs to wake up. There are, so many opportunities to make the healthcare system better.
And the tools exist already. That's something that we touched on yesterday
Yeah.
in that MSK pod. The tools exist. They are out there. You just have to be willing to look for them. And obviously, you mentioned how important that consultant decision is. You need a great consultant to help you find those tools, right?
But you
And
have
vet
to,
those tools.
and you have to overcome the fear.
Yeah.
Because change is hard.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come without disruption. But at the end of it, you'll find the light at the end of the tunnel and wish you had done it sooner. And I am just grateful to have the platform to keep talking to, whoever's listening.
Yeah.
To shine the light on the opportunities that they have to make it a better, healthcare program for their employees.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's better for our economy. It's better for families. It's
Yeah.
better for literally everybody. So again, Stephanie, thank you for this. And I wish you safe travels back home. And I look forward to maybe a year or two down the line. And then we'll come back and say, hey, what's going on
Absolutely.
in your plan today? Because I can't wait to hear about it. So thanks again, Steph.
Thank
I appreciate you. Yeah.